Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organisation sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Welcome to episode 104 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have a person on the show with us today who played such a large part in altering my trajectory for life for the better. Around mid-2015, I saw the TED Talk, How Many Rules at Work Keep You From Getting Things Done, presented by Mr Yves Morieux. This talk both shocked and inspired me. Yves Morieux is a Managing Director of Boston Consulting. He is the author of the book 6 Simple Rules, How to Manage Complexity Without Getting Complicated. Yves has also delivered another amazing TED Talk titled As Work Gets More Complex, 6 Rules to Simplify. Let's get into the episode. Yves, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brad.
Yves, what's your backstory? What led you down this path of studying productivity, leadership, and excellence within organizations and, playing such a big part in everything you've done and with Boston Consulting?
I studied management, microeconomics, and organizational sociology. By the way, some of that at the University of Glasgow, wow. University of Strathclyde in Scotland, and at the Paris Institute of Political Science. So at the beginning, I started working in strategic consulting, not at BCG, not at Boston Consulting Group, but at Arthur D. Little, which we have a bit forgotten, but was a very respectable consulting organization, I think set up in 1895. I think it wow. is the first consulting firm that we study at school. At school you study the various matrices, the BCG matrix, the ADL. Arthur D. Little was called ADL matrix, and so on. And originally I was working on strategy and what is called sometimes modern financial theory. And my first publication was trying to reconcile strategy and modern financial theory, and that took me to performance issues. How is performance produced, managed, organized, improved, but the tools that we were using at the time, the people around me, I didn't really like them. So I left and I joined a team of researchers who were also doing some counseling in organization. And at some point, an old professor I had at Sciences Po, Paris Institute of Political Science, joined us, this team, and together we developed some interesting approaches that connect, I would say, I was bringing microeconomics, organizational sociology, and microeconomics. And we started to work for big companies, even though we were a small group. And this is where really I learned the trade, I would say, working on the intersection of microeconomics and organizational sociology. And this is very important for the analysis and improvement of performance, enterprise excellence, because it is about decision making in setting prices, in running equipments and machineries, managing supply chains. It touches all the elements of the organization. And this is how it started, I would say. And then this team was very successful. And as you know, sometimes it's very difficult to survive huge success. So there was some explosion, so to speak. And then I joined BCG. And that was important because so far, I would say I was mainly on the descriptive side. Science, social sciences are good to describing what is happening. They are less about, or at least I was less about prescribing what to do. And joining BCG, I would say, forced me to move from descriptive to prescriptive, giving advice, counseling, rather than just modeling performance and excellence. So I would say that was the trajectory.
It's a great one to have, but that you've got that blend of microeconomics and sociology. And I was talking to Jeff Leiker also, and he had that background, similar background, and you got to sit in that real study and research and learn and understand, and then move it into the practical. Like, that's an amazing opportunity to have, because I guess a lot of us, we get thrown into the practical, but do you deeply understand the background of it all?
Exactly. This is, to me, the very important, because otherwise there is the risk of being prescriptive by using models, frameworks that jump to some kind of solutions without a deep understanding of how performance is produced. So I think it's important, and in the training I am giving in my company to our younger people, and me and my colleagues, I'm not alone, of course. I lead the Institute for Organization at BCG. So we have various colleagues, which we train our teams on this deep understanding, analytically, rigorously understanding how performance is produced by the organization. It is not just a mechanical effect of structures, processes, metrics, incentives, that would linearly, mechanically lead to performance. No, there is a kind of system, a systemic interplay between these elements. And to understand how you can improve performance, you need a deep analysis and insight. We need insight. Without insight, there is no reason why we would find ways to solve issues that companies with their leaders, managers, don't find the solution. So the role is using insights, producing insight with the client people, of course, to find the minimally sufficient ways to improve performance, minimally sufficient. Always this idea of simplicity, which is hard work. As we know, it's hard to be simple, in the end.
Definitely. And I loved your TED talk I saw on the 6 simple rules. But if I got this right, you're really saying that to achieve performance, there's a lot of systemic interplay amongst an organization. And I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, I heard that it's really case by case in a way. It's about understanding the organization and drawing out those insights and that understanding, and then finding the simplest path to increase performance, to keep it simple and easy. I guess when you're talking change, keeping it simple and easy is a great thing to do. Exactly.
But again, I insist on the importance of analysis. I remember, usually to do this work, you do observation, you observe what is happening in the organization, you do some process mapping, the order, the sequence of decisions, actions, activities, resource allocation. We do also interviews, a specific kind of interviews. And I remember a company that was trying to improve performance, and they had used some consultants in the past. And these consultants were trying to motivate the people by using frameworks, frameworks that say that work is more enjoyable, more engaging if there is variety in the tasks. If there is variety, people will be engaged, and therefore they will be more productive and they will be happier. And this is based on some kind of psychological framework saying that variety at work is good in itself. And it was not very successful. So some years later, they called us, and we did with my teams, we did about 75 interviews of these people, different functions, different levels, different activities. And at some point, somebody told me, and in these interviews, we ask people questions about their work. What do you find the most interesting in your work, the most difficult, the most frustrating? How do you manage to deal with issues? With whom do you have to work, collaborate to address or to solve these issues and these interactions? Are they positive, negative? Well, you use these questions to get people's perceptions of what they do. And at some point, somebody, when I asked him the question, what do you like the most in your work? His answer was, what I like the most in my work is that it is always the same.
Yeah.
That doesn't fit any framework. What I like is that it is always the same. And at the beginning, I wrote it down and then when we were analyzing the data, what people said, triangulating the data, I stumbled across this sentence that I had not noticed when I was taking notes during the interview. And I said, but what does that mean? How can I make sense of this sentence? And then we looked at all the other interviews, data, triangulating, and we understood that for various reasons, many people in this organization were immigrants, and they didn't speak the local language. And they had a kind of color scheme, color code to operate the machines. Yellow, green, red means the pace at which you need to operate the machine, when you need to call maintenance for interventions, do preventive maintenance. And that's very important for performance, because of course, if you don't synchronize production, the rate, the pace at which you operate the machines, and maintenance, you have idle times, breakdowns, or just insufficient productivity. And therefore, as soon as there is variety in the work, these people are lost. So we were able to understand what was, the real work of the company, the real organization, which is very different from, textbooks, frameworks. People love variety for the sake of variety. No, it depends what is important to them in this situation, in this environment. And then with this insight, you can come up with useful recommendations as opposed to the frameworks that we are based on preconceived assumptions that are often wrong. And this is what I would say I find the most interesting in this work, which is to find the truth for the good of the company and the good of the people. And in the end, by the way, and that is perhaps a recent discovery over the last few years, that what is good for performance, for productivity, for speed to market, for quality, for innovation, is always good for satisfaction at work, for engagement. There is no contradiction between productivity, performance, and satisfaction. They are the two sides of the same coin. If you do it well, when you improve satisfaction, you improve productivity. And I am not talking about a causal relationship. Perhaps there is a causal relationship, but this is not what I am talking about. I am not saying when people are more satisfied, they are more productive, therefore you improve performance. No, that I'm not saying. I'm just saying that they are the two sides of the same coins. It is simultaneity. Simultaneously, when you improve one, you improve the other, if you do it well. If you address the root causes, you improve both simultaneously, I would say.
I love it, Yves, the whole concept of seek to understand where it's important, which is where we're actually producing value. And then from there, make decisions. But it's so true that, is there many people that would go to work and not want to achieve the best outcome they can within the climate they're in?
You're right. People don't wake up in the morning saying, today I will have an unexpected problem and I don't know, delay the schedule or delay a train if you are a railway, delay a plane if you are an airline, or no. People are dealing with issues. What they are dealing with with what we call problems, at work. And we need to understand these. And as I said earlier, these are usually not correlated with structure, procedures in a simple way. It is not mechanical, it is not linear, it is systemic. And we need to understand these systems, this system at work that produces or does not produce performance, and then work on the system.
Yves, on that, I've got a question for you, because I know a lot of your talks, cooperation has really come through strongly, and I love it. The collaboration, cooperation, those key elements. And I see in organizations myself, I see this really break between divisions. It can really break between divisions or departments. Let's talk a factory floor again, on the maintenance to operations. It can be broken. But also between leadership, the whole cooperation and flow of communication can be broken. Do you mind exploring some of your understanding and insights and some things you've seen there? Because, we've said that people come to work, they want to do a great job, they want to produce quality and productivity, but you get these breaks in cooperation and collaboration that can really hurt it.
Very good. Well, if you take an executive committee, which is the top leadership of the company around the CEO. What I have realized over the years is that this is an important body. It is not just sitting together for 4 hours every week or every 2 weeks to exchange ideas or to share what we are doing. Because if it is only that, usually what happens is that when the other speaks, you do your email more or less discreetly, but you don't listen because it's useless. And again, people are rational. They are not perfectly rational, but there is what Herbert Simon, Nobel Prize, 1978, said, bounded rationality. It's not perfect, but it's not equal to zero. And therefore, if it is not useful to me, I will not listen. So it's a waste of time. But in reality, it's very important, an executive committee, leadership, working together on the most important, on the most complex problems of the company. This is the role of an executive team, leadership team, executive committee, to work together on the most complex problems of the company. And if we work in silos, we don't work together on the most complex problems of the company. And sometimes it is a mental revolution, a Copernican revolution for some executive teams to realize that they are not here to listen to each other in a kind of passive way, but to work together on the most complex problems. And why is this happening? Because, as you said, you have these silos, but why these silos? It's because the company has failed to identify the collective issues on which they need to work together. And this, again, takes work. It takes work to realize on what do we need to work together. Problems, important issues, challenges don't fall from the sky, all baked, ready to be solved. Framing problems, posing what is the problem. Very often I say the problem is the problem. The problem is what is the problem? It doesn't, in science, in physics, in hard sciences, problems are already the result of some conceptual work. Problems don't fall all prepared from the sky. No, what is the right problem we need to work on? Framing the right issues, framing takes work. And this is sometimes our role also, to work with the CEO and the executive committee, helping them identify the challenges on which they need to work together. And this will break the silos, of course, because we have the collective stake that we need to address. But without this collective stake that we need to address, of course, we will work in silos because we feel that we are much more effective, efficient, leading our division, business unit, department, market, geography, than exchanging ideas. We are not a club just to exchange ideas. We are here to work, but on what? We don't know. So then we don't work together. So this is part also of our job with teams, with executive teams, to help them identify these collective challenges. What we call sometimes their must-win battles. The must-win battles that we need to address together.
That really resonates strongly, because you mentioned earlier that an organization is a systemic connection of elements, and if you don't have the executive who are working as a team to overcome the biggest systemic problems, exactly, then the organization's not going to go forward.
Of course. Absolutely. Yeah, the top inspires, of course, what happens in the company, in the organization. And if we work in silos at the top, we will work in silos everywhere. And those who will bear the consequences are the poor middle manager. The middle managers between the executive team, the top, and operations, frontline management. These mid managers, very often they are called sometimes I have heard that the frozen middle.
Yeah.
But and then we tend to blame these people, or we do delayering. We eliminate some layers, and sometimes it is like throwing the baby with the bathwater, because as you said, organizations tend to be very complicated with solid reporting lines, dotted lines, and the committees, the metrics, scorecards, reporting, control, and so on. And if you think about it, this maximum complicatedness, where does it happen? What is the area in the organization that has the densest, the most dense, the most densely tighted knots of complicatedness? It is in the middle. At the top, there is no complicatedness, because all the lines start from the top. Where do they cross? In the middle, because at the bottom you have less complicatedness. People who operate the machines, they don't have a solid reporting line and a dotted line. No, the machine cannot work in a dotted way. So it's now in the middle you have this complicatedness, and this prevents, and this is why these people suffer so much. And this depends also on decisions made at the top. Yet, middle management is fundamental for performance, for productivity, quality, speed, reliability, innovation. Mid managers are fundamental. They are the intermediate, the link between operations and strategy and direction.
Yeah, but I'm guessing if they're living within a crazy systemic structure and they're dealing with fires they can't deal with and problems, and they're overburdened, they're not going to have time and headspace to put to those great things that you said that they can do.
Exactly. And earlier, before we started the recording, we were talking about the COVID crisis, the lockdown. These mid managers were very often the most reluctant to move to remote working, on Teams, Zoom, WebEx, whatever. And again, people using preconceived frameworks said, yeah, but these mid-managers, they are a bit conservative, narrow-minded, retrograde. That's why they resist. No, it is because these people have so little room of maneuver, so little power between the dotted, the full, solid, bold, solid reporting lines, that one of the few levers left to them is physical proximity with people. Yeah? Physical proximity to get things done. The office is, looking at what is happening, knocking at the door, asking the people, talking at the coffee machine, is one of the few levers left to them. And with the lockdown, this lever was removed. This resource was removed. So they were left with all the constraints without the resource. And therefore, the rational behavior, of course, is to ask people to come back to the office as soon as possible, or even during the lockdown, not because they were stupid, but because they were intelligent. That's usually what you find. If people do what they do, it's not because they are stupid, as we often think. No, it's because they are intelligent. They adjust to a system that we have failed to understand, to perceive. And then when you have understood, this is what we call insight earlier, everything becomes easier to address in a minimally sufficient way without complicated solutions that are often counterproductive, not only because they are complicated, but also because they are just off the mark, like saying we need to give them variety at work. Yeah? We need variety. Why? Because variety is good, according to where does it come from? The Tavistock Institute. Okay. No.
Yeah.
Great. The Tavistock Institute is terrific, did great work. I have nothing against the Tavistock Institute, just to illustrate some sources of information and frameworks.
I was just thinking, even when you talked about that element, the amount of context switching and variability and chaos that could bring to a factory environment would be off the charts.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I get a lot of factory people just dread the most is constant schedule changes and coming through. They know it causes carnage. And
Exactly.
As you know, I'm a fan of Yves' work, and this conversation is amazing. As part of this episode, we are going to give away one of Yves' books, 6 Simple Rules, How to Manage Complexity Without Getting Complicated. If you're interested in going to the draw, go to enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/contact to register. The conversation's really good because we're talking about the critical part that the senior executives play in this, because they own that role to really help improve this system, this whole complex organism that is at work there. And really, like you're saying, it can be one or two things to focus on to really turn the performance. One question I've got, and I hear this a lot, is the impact senior leadership have on culture, or leadership have on culture. And there's that saying, leadership shadow and the shadow of culture. What is your view on that and your thoughts on that, just to bring that cultural bit into play?
Yes. So, right. Culture is a fundamental driver of decisions, actions, behaviors, therefore performance, because performance is just the addition of behaviors. We tend to forget that, but performance is what it is because people do what they do. Behaviors are performance in the making, to put it in another way. And culture, of course, shapes behaviors and mindsets. What I agree, the leadership team has an important influence on culture, but at the same time, this influence is constrained. A leadership team cannot decree overnight a cultural change. Okay, we can decree a new slogan, a new poster to put on the walls, new flyers, videos talking about sustainability, diversity, inclusion, equity on paper. But in real life, in the real culture, it is much more difficult, and it takes longer if we are really talking about real culture. Culture can evolve, but seriously, to me, very often I have heard people asking me to help them change the culture, and I told them, look, if you are really talking about culture, behaviors and mindsets, it cannot take less than 3 to 5 years, and it's closer to 5 than to 3. And forget about 6 months and I want a new culture because we have a new strategy. No, it's so you're right. The leadership team plays a very important role, but this role is constrained by many elements, and moving these elements is possible. We have many examples, but it takes persistence, insights, and time. It's
I'm guessing too, Eva, it'd take a lot of constancy of effort too, because you could have, it's a long time, takes a lot of effort, but if you have some massive stumbles in the way, it could set you back a lot too, if there's not that consistency of experience and behaviors that people have.
Exactly. No, there are some organizations that evolved thanks to a crisis. Without the crisis, they would not have evolved. Sometimes, I mean, there are some organizations where the crisis, it could be a financial, economic, operational crisis with a disaster, a big accident, an explosion, whatever, massive product defects, led to cultural change because there was this sudden moment where the company was facing complexity, what I call complexity, that has nothing to do with complicatedness. Complexity are the problems we have to address to create value for stakeholders, customers, shareholders, employees, legal authorities, compliance, regulators, and so on. This is complexity. And because of the crisis, these companies were facing huge complexity, an outburst of complexity that outpaced their ability to complicate and formalize. They could not, if you take the example of the COVID, which was a huge crisis for some companies, not for all in the same way. They didn't have a chief COVID officer. They could not create a COVID process. They had to face complexity. They didn't have the time to create complicatedness. And this is the issue. To summarize everything we have said, we need to enable the organization to face complexity. Very often, we use the organization to deal with internal complicatedness, the structure, process, systems. A crisis forces people to face complexity. And because people are adaptable, intelligent, then they find ways to address the issue. So this is why sometimes a crisis is good for transformation, because it forces people's intelligence to apply to complexity as opposed to be confined to deal with complicated internal procedures and processes and structure.
And Yves, I know with the topic we're talking on, and typically our life, we're dealing with our day-to-day, the complexity of our day-to-day, the complexity at work. But there is a bigger picture, and I learned this from you with the statistics you were talking about global productivity. There's a whole thing there's a whole thing about what are we going to leave for our next generation by way of their position in life and the amount they can buy and what can they own and all this position. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy for us as humans to think of that bigger picture, but do you mind explaining global productivity trends and this sort of bigger picture of what's going on with this?
Yes. Basically, I will come back to, Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize in Economics, once wrote, productivity is not everything, but on the long run, it is almost everything. Almost. So basically, our standards of living, our ability to have access to education, vaccinations, antibiotics, water, bridges, infrastructure depends on productivity improvement, productivity growth. And by the way, Paul Krugman wrote that in a book that he titled The Years of Diminishing Expectations, because that was in the mid-90s, at a time where US productivity was really slowing down in an alarming way. And then productivity improved again, labor productivity improved in the US. And everybody said, no, Krugman is wrong. No need for diminishing expectations in terms of standards of living because productivity is back. But this didn't last many years. This didn't last many years, only around 2000. And then again, the slowdown. If you have a long-term perspective, productivity, in summary, to summarize, the productivity growth rate has been divided by 10 over the last 50 years. Let's say it was 5% per annum in the 15 largest European economies. Now it is less than 0.5 on average, divided by 10. And you have the same pattern, more or less accentuated in Japan, in the US, in Brazil, in Russia, in China, even in China. And so this is the real issue. And this is what I have been working on now for almost 15 years.
It's a key topic because I think we all care about our kids and our grandkids and that to come, don't we? But even I know back the 5% year-on-year growth in the 50s meant great outcomes for the next generation. What does getting below sub 0.5% mean?
You're right. That's a good point. So, again, if you want to have some numbers in mind, when productivity grows 3% per annum, you double the standards of living every generation. Every generation is twice as well off as its parents with a 3% productivity growth rate, which means that, if the family in the past had 2 children and to send one child to college, the other child has to go to work because we cannot afford to send both children to a college or university. Well, the next generation, when they have 2 children, will send the 2 kids to university and college because productivity increased by 3% per annum over one generation. When productivity grows 1% per annum, 1%, it takes 3 generations to double the standards of living. And in this process, many people will be less well off than their parents. When you are at 0.5%, well, it will take 6 generations to double the standards of living. So forget, and people will not be able to have a house, a flat. They will have to share a flat. Even if they have a job, the 3, the 4 kids freshly graduated and starting to work will not be able to afford their own home for their family. They will have to share together. We are close to a zero-sum game, which means that the only way to improve standards of living for some people is to degrade standards of living for other people. The only way to open a new hospital, a new school, there is to close another school, another hospital somewhere else. The only way to maintain a bridge somewhere or to build a new bridge is to stop maintaining another bridge. And then the bridge will collapse. And we see bridges starting to collapse. And it is not the laws of gravity that makes bridges collapse. It is just the productivity slowdown. And despite all the new technologies, we talk about the internet,
social media,
ERP systems, the cloud, digital technologies, and this is Solow's paradox. Another Nobel Prize, Robert Solow, 1987, who was the first one to say, we see computers everywhere. At a travel agent, I don't know, an airline counter, except in the productivity statistics. And we see the computer age everywhere, except because the productivity statistics started to slow down, I would say, even in the mid-70s. Then there was a rebound around 2000, but only in the US, for different reasons. I don't want to, but there was, and this did not happen in Europe, by the way, because these productivity improvements in the US were based on some specific issues or that could not happen in Europe. And today, we need to learn new ways to use technology, because if there is this productivity slowdown, despite all these innovations, it is for two reasons, mainly. As I said, complicatedness. This complicatedness kills productivity. People spend their time writing reports because they have to report on more and more scorecards and metrics and KPIs. They have to plan. The plan never works because of volatility. So they have to unplan, replan, explain the variance. They spend their time in meetings because they have to coordinate with more and more functions. So in the end, there is little time to face complexity. Most of the time is used dealing with complicatedness, the internal bureaucracy, reason one. And reason two, we misuse technology. Technology is used in the service of complicatedness, not to face complexity. Look at the way we use, we use our systems, just to organize meetings, requests, in an easier way. So we use technology to make complicatedness easier to swallow, to digest, and then we have an indigestion, you say in English, hopefully. At least in French it works. So that's the counterproductive use of technology. So to me, our future generations, we are at a crossroad, seriously. Either we learned better ways to use technology in organizations that stop getting complicated in an attempt to face the complexity of the environment, and then we are great. Then there is a new rebound in productivity, or we don't, and then we have the years of diminishing expectations, as Paul Krugman was saying.
But Yves, just the complexity now. Like you talk, most companies I know, an individual in that company in a management position will be getting communication via Microsoft Teams, via the phone, via email, via WhatsApp, via this, via that. They'll have files saved in Microsoft Teams. They'll have it on the internet. They'll have it here. They'll have it there. Like, our brain is not built to handle that volume of context switching and complexity. It hurts my brain.
Yes.
But
of complicatedness, I would say of complicatedness, because our brain can deal with complexity, complex issues. I make always a difference between complexity, which are problems whose resolution creates value. So this is complexity, problems, challenges whose resolution creates value. Like, I don't know, creating a product that is more affordable and more reliable. This is complex, cheaper, better quality. Gosh, it's complex. Now, complicatedness are the wrong solutions to deal with these issues. The structure, I will create a Mr. Cost to cut costs and a Mr. Quality to improve quality. Then problem is solved. I will do something cheaper, better. No, because if Mr. Cost and Mr. Quality don't work together, don't collaborate, they will create a middle office between the two. We will have now a new problem instead of, we have two problems between the each and the middle office instead of one, and we will not have real design, engineering solutions that address the root causes. So it's not because we have a new function in charge of quality and another in charge of cost, that we manage to solve that complex issue. We create more complicatedness, but we don't face the complexity. So this is, to me, and you're right, the way technology is used currently with all the prompts, also prompts, as we are talking now, I have had already 7 prompts that came, that told me this program needs to be closed because there is an update, or you can continue, defer, or whatever. And I had to click anyway. So again, we use technology, digital technologies, again, according to some bureaucratic processes that create tasks. And we use IT to decentralize, delegate these tasks onto the people that have more and more. And there is a vicious circle, because the less people are productive because of this complicatedness, the less we are afraid to asking them to do more things, like reserve your flight, your hotels, your taxi, do your PowerPoints, organize your meetings, and so on. And IT is great to do that. But then, again, more and more time spent on multitasking, and multitasking, as we know, is bad because it doesn't create learning, the learning effect. Plus, as you said, you are distracted constantly. So
I've seen the statistics from Weinberg's context switching, and you have to switch from one thing to another. Your productivity just starts tanking. But the amount that people are having to context switch every 30 seconds at the minute in workplaces is just off the charts. This is why yourself inspired me so much with what you've studied and what you're talking about, because I don't think there'd be a person in this world that doesn't want their kids and their grandkids to have at least what they've got now. Exactly. And then the other person I got to admit is Steve Irwin, who was so passionate about the environment. That's another point for mine, because I want my kids and my grandkids and everyone's kids and grandkids to have at least the environment we've got now too. You're like, that's exactly. At least the wish. And that's the beginning. To me, they're the two big purposeful burning platforms that, man, we can shift some change, but the challenge is breaking out of the chaos of our day-to-day to then be focused and actually put the effort on this bigger outcome.
And again, the work I'm doing on productivity today shows that when you improve productivity in the right way, you also improve sustainability. There is no trade-off. Very often we think we have a trade-off. I have to produce these goods plus produce the ways to avoid pollution by these goods. No, it's not that. Rethink the way you work, the way you design, the way you produce, and then you will simultaneously increase sustainability and productivity. Again, this is a false duality, like satisfaction at work. For all the important things on earth, there is no trade-off. There is no contract. We need to break the compromise. And when you break, and there are always ways to break the compromise. And when you break the compromise, performance, productivity, and sustainability, and satisfaction at work, you unleash new value. And this value will fuel profitable growth for all stakeholders, including society, the environment. But again, this takes insights. As we said at the beginning, it takes insight to find the way in which these two objectives can converge and reinforce each other, I would say.
I think, Yves, it comes back to your conversation about someone owning environment, someone owning quality, someone owning cost, someone owning exactly. This. You don't need it because it's the same gig.
It's the same, exactly. Yeah,
even safety, same gig.
Well, safety, absolutely. Yeah, well said. That's a good example, Brad, I would say, this one, about safety also. Otherwise, we end up with Mr. Safety, Mrs. Quality, the cost, and so on. And then we are all set. No, what matters is the work that you do and how we make decisions, how we prioritize, how we act, how we cooperate, that will create the outcome. It is, but again, you see, there is this sometimes mechanical view, if I have the right structure, linearly, I will end up with the right outcome. It's a kind of linear programming. Linear programming, I put the right instructions with the right weight. Perhaps I need to give more weight to Mr. Quality than to Mrs. Environment, because still quality and more weight. So, and we think that a kind of, a nice mathematical equation with factors and their weight will produce the barycenter, the equilibrium of behaviors. No, it doesn't work like that. It is systemic. It is not linear.
Oh, just in the simplest form, in those companies, the poor middle management and frontliners have each of those departments coming to them each week at least every 2 weeks. In theory, asking them to do the same things, but with a slightly different twinge on it. So then they end up throwing time into 4 or 5 different things where the one piece of effort would get the same outcome with a cooperated, coordinated, collaborative type of approach.
Exactly.
By
the way, you're talking about coordination, collaboration, cooperation. Good point. In the book, I think I wrote 3 pages of end notes explaining the difference, because at the beginning, when I started to use the word cooperation, some people told me about cooperation, Yves, is an old-fashioned. The new word now, the new word is collaboration. So don't cooperation, no, it's collaboration. And I said, no, there are 3 words, coordination, collaboration, cooperation. So if you have 3 words, they must not be the same thing. What are the 3 different things that they mean? And they have different meanings. So you are right to insist on that. And me, usually I talk about cooperation for various reasons, but just to say that you did well. Sorry.
Oh, thanks, Yves. Yves, we've had a big conversation on really critical factors, and for me, it's paramount, the topic we've just spoken on. But Yves, what would be like a 2-minute tip you'd give to leaders listening to this, and they're like, yeah, okay, we've got to get better at proactivity and pulling everything together and getting rid of the complexity and find our way to move forward. What would be that 2-minute tip you'd give them?
2 minutes. The tip is basically, whenever you are going to create a new rule, a new procedure, ask yourself, what will be the impact on people's actions and decisions? So a rule is not good in itself. A procedure is not good. It is good or bad according to the effect it will have on people's actions, decisions, because this is what drives performance. Performance is the sigma, the addition of actions, decisions. And what matters with the rule is not the content of the rule, is not the intent of the rule. It is the way the rule is used. This is what really makes the difference in reality. It is not the rule, but how people use the rule. So ask yourself, what will be the impact on behaviors? How will the rule be used? If you put at a crossroad, if you put a traffic light, what will be the impact on people's behavior? And perhaps a roundabout without a traffic light is safer and faster than putting a traffic light. When we put a traffic light, a new rule, we expect that it will be simpler, there will be more discipline because people see the red light, therefore they will stop. What will be the impact on behavior? Perhaps in reality, if I put a roundabout, people will have to pay more attention precisely because there is no red light. So when you pay more attention, you can avoid accidents with cars that failed to see the red light, because people sometimes they don't see the red light because they are talking at that moment. And if you expect everybody to respect the rule, the new traffic light, you will drive because you have a green light, and then accident with now roundabout, people will pay attention, will use their intelligence, will use their brain, and perhaps it is faster, safer, simpler than a new traffic light. So when you create rules, ask yourself what will be the impact on behavior. Not is a traffic light good in itself. According to the theory of traffic lights, of course, it is safe because red. If you cross, you will go to jail. No, but sometimes people don't pay attention. And okay, he will go to jail, but I am dead. I don't give a damn whether he will go or she will go to jail. So that's my tip. Otherwise, we create more complicatedness in a counterproductive way. We spend more time on the rules, on the processes, and on top of that, to take us in the wrong direction. So it's double whammy in some respect.
Yeah, because often a rule or a procedure or anything like that can rapidly lead to the wrong behavior and the wrong mindset. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, because we have not asked ourselves the right question, which is not, is the rule good, but how will it be used? And the way it is used, the way it will be used, what impact will it have on performance through behaviors, basically? Sorry.
Yeah. Same with the deployment of new technology. It's, you gave me one of the biggest insights of my life, and I can remember where I was and what was going on when I first heard your podcast, that one that not the podcast, the TED Talk. But Yves, what's been a recent insight for you? Has there been a recent discovery that you've sort of sat you back a bit with your learning?
It has to do with the way we use technology. I think the way we all too often misuse technology is more severe, more damaging than I initially thought. Because at the moment I am working a lot on how we can use technology to improve productivity, the new, artificial intelligence, notably digital technologies with sensors, connectivity, computing power. And I realized that the way we misuse these technologies in the service of complicatedness instead of facing complexity is deeper and more severe than I thought. But in some respects, this is, I would say, a good news, because it means that if we change these ways of using technology, we have a lot of untapped potential in front of us. And industrial revolutions, they always take a lot of years. This started already perhaps 10, 15 years ago, what we call, some people call it the fourth industrial revolution. Others say we are still in the third one. Doesn't matter. We have not yet achieved the new revolution. Why? Because every industrial revolution around the steam engine in the end of the 18th century, around electricity, the electric motor between the 19th and the 20th century, and now the new industrial revolution. Industrial revolutions, they always require an organizational revolution. If we don't change the ways of working in a revolutionary way, we are not able to deliver on the potential of the new technologies. It took the Taylorian organization to deliver on the promise of electricity, of the electric motor, and to create the assembly line. Today we are in the middle of an organizational revolution, but it is not there yet. And this is what we are discussing. What are the new ways of working to face the new complexity and better leverage these technologies? This is a new and agile, lean, what I call smart simplicity, holacracy. All these new are attempts to find the way to the new organization, the new ways of working. But we are not there yet. Otherwise, productivity would be beautiful and so on.
Yeah, but I just love the conversation where it's the technology's there. It's just how do we use it to drive the right behavior, to get productivity gain, quality gains, environmental gains, safety gains, the win-wins that you and I know are there, and create a better future for our kids and our grandkids and those to come.
Exactly.
Mate, I'm with you.
You are talking. Please, sorry, Brad.
No, after you.
No, I was just saying, you were talking at some point about my TED Talk, how too many rules at work keeps you from getting things done or getting work done. where I use the relay race runners,
Yes.
the relay race, and the fastest runners individually don't win the race. It is an average team individually that wins the race because collectively they have a better handover, a better cooperation. To use a simple analogy about using technology, suppose we were putting digital technology and AI in the real service of the runners. Basically, what would it mean? It would mean put on the stick, the baton that they pass from one to the other, using sensors, connectivity, some kind of learning algorithm that would tell the runners, look, you will pass the baton in 2 seconds, given your usual speed, given your current speed, given your distance between you and the next runner, given the speed, the location of the next runner, now you need to throw your hand to pass the baton. You need to shout to say you are coming. You need to change hand. This would be IT put in the service of real work. Today, if we continue this analogy, what does it do, IT? Again, multitasking. IT would ask the runners to help seat the people in the stadium and to sell tickets and to book their dressing room with a kind of office flex space reservation system. So again, you see, IT is used to create multitasking, vertical loading of admin tasks onto the work, as opposed to be put in the service of the real job, the real work. Yeah. So that's the way we use IT today, not in the service of the passing of the baton, but to make people contribute to seating the audience in the stadium, selling tickets and reserving their dressing room.
Yeah. And they're context switching all over the place, and they've got disruptions left, right, and center every 30 seconds. And there's no way they can run the race. They're just spending a lot of their day cleaning their email inbox, which is just.
But the good news is that there is a lot of potential. This is, at some point, these new ways of working, they are emerging. And then there is light at the end of the tunnel. So, when I said we are at a crossroad, I think the probability of a brighter future is greater than the probability of a darker future.
I love it, Yves. I love it. I'll be working towards that too, mate, with everything I do. So thank you. Yves, how can people get hold of your books, reach out, or get in touch with Boston Consulting? What's the best path that they do from hearing this episode?
So people can happily write to you, write to me, my Morieux.yves, Yves at bcg.com. And then we will send them the book or tell them how to buy the book. You can find it at a local bookshop in New York. I saw it the other day, or of course using platforms to order it from Harvard Business Review Press, the publisher. And then, of course, we have offices in, if I remember well, about 90 cities around the world. So we have always a green light. Green is the color of BCG somewhere.
Oh, thank you so much, mate. And thank you for all you've done and all you'll continue to do to help us create a better future, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bud, for your time. Take care.
Cheers, Yves.
Bye-bye.
It is such an honor to have Yves on the show with us today. And as always with Yves, I have gained so much from the conversation, which I hope you have also. Please like and share this podcast to help others and create a better future. Remember our draw to win one of Yves' books. Go to enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/contact to get in the draw. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode. Firstly, when you're going to create a new rule or procedure, ask yourself what will be the impact on people's actions and decisions. A rule is not good in itself. A procedure is not good. It is good or bad according to the effect it will have on people's behaviors, because this is what drives performance. Performance is a sigma, the addition of actions and decisions. And what matters with a rule is not the content of the rule, not the intent of the rule, it is the way the rule is used. This is what really makes a difference in the reality of things. My second key takeaway is related to my first. Start with the frontline team members who create value for customers whenever you want a change to be made. Understand their position first. Gain their ideas and input. Involve people and they will understand, is the famous saying. They will also be able to tell you what would help achieve the right behavioural outcomes to create improvement for customers. I loved Yves' consultancy approach with Boston Consulting. Seek to understand from the frontline first and frontline leadership, and then work on the few critical things to help the organisation improve. Thanks again, Yves, for your time and knowledge. Thanks for inspiring me all those years ago to head down this path, and thanks for all you will continue to do in the future. Bye for now.